This is already a fan favorite episode of the Afterthoughts podcast. Today is going to be a great day. Jenna Lewis in the house with us.
Hello.
Let me read her resume. Genius.
No.
Yes.
Yep. Teacher.
Yes.
Lawyer.
Check.
Yeah.
Genius. Twice on there.
Wow.
She took 2 different tests.
I put that on my resume by myself.
That's the good thing about,
I highlighted
that's the
my
great
own
thing about resumes. You can
geniusness.
put anything you want.
Wait. What's the plural of genius?
Genii?
See?
Wow.
The genie.
Just twice.
The
Genie.
genie, because the
Genie.
genie knew a lot of stuff.
That's when you become
All
a genius.
things.
I found this note when I got here today. I'm back. Are you scared? Kayla's
Yes.
back.
Dun, dun,
Yay!
dun.
Kayla Senior.
Yay!
How was your
Welcome back,
How was your
Kayla.
trip?
It was so good. Glad to be back. Thanks, guys, for having me.
Great. Thanks for catching us up on your trip. Ryan also went on a trip.
I did.
Tell us about it.
I got back 4 hours ago, which was
Oh, really?
just Ubered right to the church and got here at 5 a.m.
Kind of a red eye
And,
situation here. He's got
Our
red
building
eyes.
is a
Tired.
little sketchy, and so I just walked into this office and saw that note and got actually terrified.
A little bit scared.
It's like, well,
Well, there
somebody
you
is
go.
here
Just
to
looking
kill me.
around.
Good job.
Yeah.
I did
Good
it.
job.
Jenna, have you
Yes.
gone on any trips recently since everyone's bragging about their vacations?
I went to Spain and took a bunch
Wow.
of people from Red Rocks.
That's
And
right.
It was
There you
great.
go.
Tell us real
It was
quick
super fun.
about that.
Why that
whole
happened?
cause.
I do some side work for an anti-human trafficking org,
Cool.
and I do policy work for them. And it's a network of organizations, and so we brought all of our organizations together in Spain to have a rest and rejuvenation and building them up and all of that. And it's a Christian org, and so we brought the Red Rocks Austin
Yes.
worship team with
my
us.
favorite band
They are
in
also
Austin.
my favorite. Yes,
Yeah,
specifically.
I have some other favorites. but-
Yes,
Yeah.
fair. But it was great.
Is the organization under the radar? Can you share who it is? If
Atlas
people want
Free
to
is the name of it.
Say it again?
Atlas Free.
'Kay.
So they can follow them on Instagram,
Yeah,
learn a
support them.
bunch, support
Support
them.
'em.
They're awesome. They love Jesus and do really great work
Let's
helping
go.
people all over the world.
That's awesome.
Which is
give
great.
us a quick bio of yourself. Just a quick rundown on who you are.
Who am I?
What is it that you do?
What
For work.
motivates me in life?
Sure.
Who am I?
Personality profiles,
yep.
all that stuff.
ENTJ, Enneagram 3, which should answer a lot of questions.
ENTJ, those are the people that ear, nose, and throat doctors.
Yes.
Is
Yeah,
that, am I
yes.
correct? there?
Myers.
Correct.
Wow, so you're a doctor and a lawyer.
TMJ. That's how it works.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's what it is. But
Impressive.
so
3 times over in the Enneagram.
Understood.
Correct.
Yep. So we understand. You know.
You got me. There
Yep.
you go. You
Good.
need nothing else. But I am a lawyer, which is it's interesting. It's fun.
It's got its
Has all of
interesting.
its all
That's
of
a good
its
way of saying
things.
that.
Yeah.
Has its people have their assumptions, which are probably true and fair. So that's all right.
Yeah.
But
Well, let me stop you right there. Been watching Suits. Do you work
Ooh.
for Harvey Specter?
I don't. My husband kind of does.
Whoa.
He does more of that stuff than I do. I work for the government.
Yeah.
We're
I've heard of it.
yeah, yeah. You
familiar.
pay to it.
Sure
or
do.
A minute. You pay my
Every year.
salary. So thank you. Appreciate
I'm happy
you.
to do
No.
it.
Really appreciate
Honestly.
everybody
happy to.
for that.
Give us your favorite '90s Christian song. We were talking right
jumping
before
around
this
here.
that your mom
Yep.
part of Christian radio, so you just
She
grew
ran
up
a Christian
surrounded by
radio
it.
station
Whoa.
for my whole childhood.
Okay, so you have to pick one, and it is playing on repeat for a 24-hour period.
Oh, wow.
Oh, easy.
What
Days
song?
of Elijah, Twyla Paris. Done.
Okay.
That song makes me feel like I can run through a wall.
I can't
love
say
that
I've
song.
heard it, but I'm going to listen to
You
it later
should,
today.
and it'll give you. It's a jam.
Yep.
It's great.
What's your favorite show about law? Since you practice it.
Or order.
Since I practice.
And how
or
come you
order.
only practice it?
Yeah, I will
you
never
just do
achieve
it?
it. I
Yeah.
won't do it. It's a practice forever.
At what point?
It's hard to watch
do you
law
stop
shows
practicing?
once you actually
Are they
do
very
it, right?
inaccurate?
They're super inaccurate.
What's the
and
most
they're
accurate one?
The Lincoln Lawyer. Actually, super accurate. The court scenes are pretty
Okay,
right. Like
okay.
occasionally they do things for drama, but for the most part,
Yeah.
pretty right.
Yeah.
And
See, in
yeah.
Suits, it seems like it's very easy. You just have to
So
be
easy.
super cool and know
And
everything.
have
then
no
she's like,
work-life
yeah, this guy,
balance
this statute of
whatsoever.
limitations. Case closed.
Case closed.
Let's go get a drink.
Yeah,
Cool.
essentially, yeah.
Okay.
But
Sweet.
that's it.
You studied
me.
at
Pepperdine Law,
Pepperdine Law. And before that,
University of Miami.
Had to bring
All
up the
about
you.
the you.
Come on.
Thank you, baby. Thank you.
Had to bring it up.
Had to bring it up
You're a Stanley Cup champion.
personally.
Congratulations.
Yes.
Thank
Congratulations.
You. Thank you. I scored the winning goal.
You are
I
the
don't know if
lone
you saw
Florida
it,
Panthers
but
fan that I've ever known.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so congratulations.
I'm all right with that. Thank
That's
you.
awesome.
What's
Do
it
you have the
like-
rat, Haley?
Shane Grant.
What's
I
it
did
like
see it
when your
last
team
year.
is in a game 7 of the Stanley Cup?
So there's
that
a
had to be
video
the
of
most.
me
She's proud of that over there.
jumping
Tense moment.
for the last
Yeah.
like 15 seconds of the
Yes.
game,
Yeah. Yep.
and just I hit the ceiling in my husband's grandma's house,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
it just was fantastic.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was the best moment.
Well, congratulations.
Thank
They
you.
say there's nothing like winning the Stanley Cup. I've heard that
So I've
from
heard.
multiple
Yeah.
sources. So
I've experienced.
Okay, so you're a lawyer,
Yes.
Yeah, a Stanley Cup champion,
Yep.
Stanley Cup champion.
a
Twilight
90s
Paris
Christian
fan.
Yep.
enthusiast.
Yep. Yeah.
This
those
is all
are
good
correct.
stuff.
That's all correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the main things we want to talk about today, talk a little bit about maturity and faith.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I just preached about that, and then I thought, who's an adult that we can have instead of Doug on
Yes.
the podcast?
Happy to
this week?
replace
Who's
him
a spiritual
anytime.
adult? Jenna.
I don't know about that. but yes.
You teach the apologetics class here.
Do,
So
yeah.
I have some questions,
Yes.
some things I'd like for you to
Okay.
apologize for.
Sure.
Since you teach apologetics.
Well, because that's what
Very
everybody
good.
thinks apologetics is.
Yeah, well,
So,
okay, real
yeah,
quick.
Yeah.
Where did that word come from? Educate us. Because
It's a
weird
Greek
word.
term.
Okay.
Apologia is the term, and it basically is saying like giving a defense to something. So I can't pull the Greek term for the prosecution off the top of my head, but the apologia was essentially what the defense would do in a trial. That was their response to it.
Yes.
And so it's the idea, it's a very philosophical term. Socrates had an apologia. Plato had his version. So it's a very Greek concept of standing up and giving a defense for what you believe and
Yeah.
all the evidence for what you believe.
You're working on your apologia,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do
I'm
you need to
40% of the way
apologize for?
through. Yeah, it's great.
It's gonna be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you make the apologetics class listen to Too Late to Apologize, the song to start
That
off each
should have
session?
been the opening.
There's always next round.
Next time.
I
Yeah.
also, before we get into questions with Kayla, have to acknowledge that it is Shark Week, and that's why I wore this shirt.
I was wondering.
Oh, yes.
Happy
that's
Shark Week.
This
Happy
is
Shark
great.
Week.
This is a
of the
great
year.
white shark on my shirt in honor of Shark Week.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you familiar with sharks? You ever spent time
I
with
have
sharks?
seen a shark or two
seen a
in
shark?
my life. Yes, I am from Florida.
You are from
So,
Florida,
Right.
Yeah,
but never been attacked by one.
I do have all my limbs, so
That's
no.
good. There's
I have not.
there's a shark that was attacking people down by
in
on the
Pensacola.
coast.
Yeah. It was wild.
And in Texas here,
It's
Oh,
the
really?
Gulf. They're
Yeah.
really coming after people
like
in the
down
Gulf.
in Port A, Corpus
Yeah.
area.
They
I
know
didn't
it's
know
Shark
that.
Week.
They know.
It's a hurricane.
Yeah, they want their moment.
Sharknado.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. So happy Shark Week.
Oh yeah.
Thank you.
And also with you.
To
You
all
spend time with
who
sharks?
observe.
I was kayaking for the last 3 days.
Were there
in-
sharks around
in
you?
Hawaii, and I would imagine it was
Okay.
right by where Bethany Hamilton got attacked. Like literally,
No dog's name.
we could see it from where
Yeah.
we started. So I'm sure we paddled over a few, and then on
Yeah.
the very last day, there were about 60 dolphins, a pod of about 60 dolphins,
No way.
surrounding
Beautiful.
us, and they were jumping and spinning. And
Wow.
it was awesome.
That's very cool.
And you feel the difference, like being surrounded by dolphins.
Yeah.
You just feel protected and good and safe.
But
'Cause
it's
they can
also
kill
the moment,
sharks.
though, of am I surrounded by a shark?
Yeah.
Which feels like a sermon analogy that you should use down the line. You're
Colossians
welcome.
2.
Colossians 2 this
Sharks and
weekend.
dolphins.
Yeah, sharks versus dolphins.
How do you determine whether it's a shark or a dolphin?
Yes.
This
Knowledge.
thing is writing itself.
Colossians
yeah.
2.
Maturity.
There it is.
Wisdom of the Lord.
You got to
Yes.
be rooted and grounded and built up in faith.
Ryan and I once got to go shark diving in Shark Alley in South Africa.
Were you
and
in a cage?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
we
I should have said
we,
cage.
Okay.
we decided to bring the cage with us.
Yeah.
That's
we
nice.
brought our cage.
Forethought.
Checked it at the airport. We just need our cage. It's 10,000
We're
pounds of
for an
steel.
anti-human trafficking organization. I feel like we should not.
I learned that you can yell underwater.
It was terrifying.
One of the sharks swam into the cage
Oh yeah.
at my face, and I yelled underwater. Even though in my head I knew it can't get me.
Right.
Yeah.
They're
Felt
so
like it could.
fast.
Wow.
And
It's
so
very cool.
So quick.
When they start circling your boat, your
Yeah.
instincts are like,
Oof.
what?
This is it.
What's going on?
The
But then
scariest
you want
part
them there
for
because you
me-
want to see them.
The scariest
Yeah.
part is stepping out of the boat and into the cage, and the opening's only like that
Yeah,
big.
you could miss.
And they like throw a weighted vest on you to help you keep you under.
You could miss.
And yeah, if you miss
Is
that,
the
you're
opening
done.
always
And then you would
open?
be
Like,
missed.
could they?
No,
swim in?
They close it, but that has
They close
happened
it.
because people have forgotten to.
Oh.
a lot of things can go wrong
Shark
with that.
Week, guys.
Shark
Happy
Week.
Shark Week.
Happy
yeah.
Shark Week.
That was a fun experience.
Wow.
Well, it sure was. And
Wow.
speaking of fun experiences, great job. questions with
Look
Kayla.
at that transition.
Thank you
Kayla,
so
It's
much.
like we've done this 46 times.
I mean,
I will have to say, even though it is Shark Week, we have a neighborhood alligator at my parents' house.
Whoa.
oh,
know.
thank you for sharing
It was
that.
probably
Does he have a name?
7 feet. We call it Allie the alligator.
That's solid.
Yeah.
I like it.
That's
It's
that's
like
pretty cool.
That's a great name.
Do you have footage
Yeah.
of it?
Yes, I do.
Maybe we can get that
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
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 Allie.
Yes.
As well, since it is Shark Week, I'd like to say we have a dog at my house, and he's a lovely creature.
Bowser.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
sleeps
I
a lot.
do
I
wonder-
literally I walked out of the door today. I said, "Bye, Bowser. Have fun today." Doing nothing, and then I just walked out. That was it.
I
Yeah.
wish I was a dog. Okay.
All right. First question.
Instead, you have to work here.
Get to. She loves her
Yes.
job.
You're
She has
right.
a great time.
Sorry.
And
Today
she
we get to do this.
you get to call yourself a
Yay.
podcaster. I mean, what's
That's
cooler
so
than
true.
that?
Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
Who?
Is this question for Joe? Here, hold on.
No.
Yeah,
Wait,
get him on
call
the
him.
line. Say Joe.
Oh.
1-800-Mothership.
Okay, he's listening.
Okay. Well, this one's for Jenna, I
Oh.
guess.
And Joe.
Okay.
And Joe.
I'll answer
Yeah.
for Joe.
Mainly for everybody, but since
Okay.
you're a certified genius,
Hope it's a
would
math
you
problem.
rather? This is a would you rather. So would you
Okay.
rather be one of the world's leading experts in a single field,
Okay.
like one single thing, or be the most like well-rounded, like versatile person in the world?
Jill
So like
of all
pretty
trades,
good
if
at
you
like a
will.
lot of things.
A Jane
Or
of all
just one.
trades. Yeah. Probably the latter.
Okay.
I think the latter. I like being an expert on one thing, but then I think I'd get bored with that thing.
That's fair.
And I'd want to
Yeah.
be an expert of other things after that.
Very good.
So, yeah.
Joe
all
said
the
he's
things.
kind of on that same
Yeah.
wavelength, and
Yeah.
he is trying with all his
Oh,
guests and stuff
good.
Sure.
to learn as much as he can. So
That
Good
makes
for
sense.
Joe.
That's good.
yeah.
Thank you for
Thank
sharing,
you so
Joe.
much.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh.
He's gonna give us Cybertrucks. All right.
Okay.
Awesome.
Great.
He's gonna get you on too, Ethan. Yeah.
Okay, next question. Sorry, you guys don't get to answer.
Okay.
no problem.
Well, that was for the last one. Now you guys can all answer.
Welcome to our segment, Questions for Jenna.
Hello.
What grade or like year in college, because they don't really call it grades, would you teach? If you were like really good at it. I mean, I guess you could be really good at second grade, but
Yeah.
what grade would you want to teach?
I feel like I'd want to do either senior of high school or senior of college, like the launch
Like a
pad.
thesis kind of.
Yeah, like the how do we take everything you just learned for the last 4 years and
Yeah.
make you into a functioning adult?
That's awesome.
very
You
good.
know?
Yeah. What about you
Yeah.
guys?
I would go first year of college, like introduction courses for either theology or psychology. So
I could see that.
set the ground, the foundation, especially like 18-year-olds. When it comes to theology, are starting to ask the big questions, and there's going to be a ton of professors trying to pull the rug out from under them, and so giving them a firm foundation would be
Yeah.
I love that.
I'd just do whatever allowed me to be a coach for sports. So
Like fourth grade,
guess
teach
gym-
PE
probably
is what you're saying.
probably high
yeah.
school PE.
Yeah. Okay.
Then coach.
Oh, dodgeball again.
Or if there's
great.
like some college courses where you learn about sports, I'll teach those.
Yeah. Phys ed.
History of sports.
Yeah. History of sports,
You
history of cricket.
I did history of America.
know
Big in
that.
America now.
History of America
Cricket
through
is awesome.
baseball
Underrated.
in college once.
You took history of baseball?
History of America through baseball.
Wow.
So like using baseball
That's
as a
what I
way to.
learned. That's
yeah.
it. That's
So you
that's
could-
my
cool.
job.
I
It was
did
really
that.
fun.
bowling class in
Yeah.
college, so you could just
They had bowling class at college.
at Auburn.
That
yeah,
was
they
an
do.
expensive
Yeah.
bowling
SEC.
class. My goodness.
learned a lot. Pretty good at it.
Are you? Okay.
What's your best score?
I don't know.
You took a
Yeah.
class. You don't know your score?
I didn't really try.
Are you sure that's a college class?
like
Yeah.
one?
Welcome to
I
higher
think you, like-
education.
If there's ever
That's why
a
I've
time
done
to
it
try,
3
it's when it's a
Your
class.
parents are like, so what's the course load? Well, bowling. What?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like one of those like you just kind of need the credits.
That's amazing that, hey, if
Yeah.
you get credits for bowling.
They had golf,
take-
so I'm sure you would have taken golf. So
Oh, yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. I would teach that. I would teach golf.
Teach golf.
Would
you
you?
Yeah. I started college at the University of San Diego, and I did get a half credit for a surfing class.
Nice.
That was sweet. No sharks
very
either. Thank God.
Well, speaking
Wow.
of sharks.
Those hurt.
Oh, speaking of sharks.
Speaking of sharks again.
Let's
Alligators.
go.
Would you rather have 100 duck-sized elephants or 1 elephant-sized duck?
100 duck-sized elephants. That sounds adorable.
Yeah, that's easy.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Just have a whole
Little
room for
mini
'em?
elephants?
Can you give them away? Because I don't want 100 of them. Can I give some?
Sure. I
I'll give
don't
you
know.
guys each one. Can
Yeah,
we-
I'll take 2.
Yeah.
Oh, 2 for you.
Look at you.
I have 98 now.
So they have
That
a
would
friend.
be cute.
A
Yeah.
duck-sized elephant would be amazing.
Yeah. He's a
Wow.
little guy.
Would they be as wise though? Because their brains would be much smaller.
What?
I don't
the
know that
wisest
that
animal.
matters necessarily.
They're wise.
Dolphins' brains are pretty small, and they are very smart.
Yeah, they are.
They have small brains
I mean, size-wise, they're not very big.
Yeah,
So
proportion.
logic would
compared.
dictate
I mean, well, all right.
that. Yeah.
And people say pigs are smart, but they can actually have really big heads.
Is like the
so
bigger
that's
the
a bad-
brain, the more
that was a bad thing.
knowledge
The
you
brain
have, or
didn't
is
make any
that-
sense.
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Yeah,
That'll make
Bugs
me
have
think.
pretty small brains. I bet they're not smart.
they're not smart.
I zap them all the time. I got this new one of those.
Do you
tennis
get?
rackets.
Do you have one of the assault guns?
Oh,
Those are
The
fun.
salt,
Those things are so
like,
great.
You're
shooting
using one of
guns?
those at my mother-in-law's the other day.
So good.
I took out a newly forming wasp nest yesterday with the zapper. I literally just held it up and went, and I got all of them on one. That's awesome.
Wow.
It was crazy.
That was
That was
dangerous.
it.
Happy
That's
Shark
all I
Week.
got.
That's it.
Shark Week.
I got more if you want more, but
No, that's fine. I got some questions for Jenna. You know, last week Wade
Okay.
Lombard was on here.
I know.
He's
I
like, I
listened.
didn't get any prep for this.
It was great.
I did send Jenna
You did
some
send me
questions
some
in advance. It's really just
pre-questions.
Wade that we didn't want to let prep. Just put him on the spot.
That's
put him
fair.
on the spot.
We like Jenna.
Well,
we care for
he's
her.
an athlete. He's got to be ready. You
That's
don't know
right.
what's coming. You're helping train him.
In
Training him.
season and out of season.
Exactly.
Always be ready.
Always prepared.
Always have your
First
Head on a
question,
apology.
Jenna.
swivel. Oh no. Okay.
Tell us about your faith journey.
Ooh.
Not even a question, I guess.
Yeah, you could have framed that as a
Could you
question.
tell us about your faith
with
journey?
one extra word.
Trying to keep her on her toes. She's a lawyer. You know they pull stunts in the courtroom.
Oh yeah, you watch
Oh, yeah.
Suits.
I watched. a
You
season
know
of
how it
Suits.
works.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. It was funny. I was thinking about this, and it's a story that is, I don't know. I think I've always been mildly insecure about it because I've never not been a Christian, which I know is a mildly controversial statement, I guess, to say, but I have known Jesus at whatever level I could know him at any given time in my life. And I had, I prayed the sinner's prayer when I was 7 and all the things, but I don't know that was like a marking moment. Like I've always known him, which is crazy. And definitely not something that I can like be proud of by any means, because I didn't do it, right? Like I feel like I'm a walking poster board for the sovereignty of God, because I was 3, what did I know, right? But I knew him, and I know that I knew him, and I have memories of it, which is wild.
Dang.
It's very cool. So I never had a deconstruction season. I never had a walk away season. I never, even in my like angriest times with the Lord, where I wasn't hearing him the same way I had heard him my whole life, I was still in church. Like I was still doing stuff. And so it's a weird thing to talk about, because I don't have like a BCAD moment in my life. And I think for a long time I really struggled with sharing my faith because of that. Because it's hard to tell a story that's just like, it's always been.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
yeah,
I don't know what my life was like ever without
Yeah.
it. And I don't know what it is forward. And I know that's like the dream of every parent.
Right, I was
Like
just
every
gonna
Christian
say.
parent is like, this is what I've prayed for my
That's what I
child
want my kids.
forever.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I know my mom is thrilled that is the case, right?
Yeah.
So it's absolutely more of a pro than a con, but it does create an interesting dynamic
Yeah.
when talking about it, you know?
But you grew up in a very heavy Christian environment.
Yes.
We were talking about the
Yes.
music that you could
Yes.
and couldn't
My-
listen
right.
to. Of like which Christian bands you were not allowed to
Well,
listen to.
I was
'cause
allowed
they
to
were
listen
too.
to them because my mom was cool, but the church I
okay.
went to was not as chill with it.
So maybe some
yeah.
legalism that you were
Maybe a
within.
little bit.
So
Yeah.
because a lot of people maybe
Yeah.
grew up like church, Christian family, like
Right.
this is just I'm immersed in this. I don't know any different.
Right.
But they walk away from that because of legalism or whatever.
Right.
What kept you
Yeah.
on your journey and not deconstructing?
It's a great question. I was talking to my husband about this a few days ago because we've been trying to have kids for a long time. And so we talk about parenthood a lot. And, what do we do? Because he was the same. He never had any he was a little older than I was when he made like the formal choice, but he was like 12, right? Like we're not, it's basically the same thing. Yeah. And so thinking about like, what did our parents do that worked? Like what, any of that. And I mean, yes, raising us the right way, keeping us in the faith, right? Like I went to a Christian school. I grew up at a church that owned a seminary, and all of the associate pastors at our church were also seminary professors. Like it was a dual job. And so all of our Sunday school classes, all of our midweek classes were taught by seminary professors at a pretty seminary-esque level. Wow. It was a really unique environment to grow up in. And I don't know, it's a two-part answer. First off, making all those choices and my mom backing it up at home and her being consistent and her learning and her knowing what she believed and it being our constant topic of conversation. When people say like, don't talk about politics and religion at the dinner table, it's like all we talked about, right? Like religion was it. Like it's like because she ran a Christian radio station, she was listening to pastors all day long. And would come home and tell me all the things that she had learned. And she took seminary classes and like all these things. Like she's just incredible. So some of it is she raised me the right way, I think. Like she put every ounce of effort into keeping me as much in that world as she possibly could and providing me with every opportunity and backed it up with her life at home. But I also had a lot of friends who had that and then did walk away in college, grew up in the exact same world I did, exact same church. And that's why it's not something that I can like pat myself on the back about. I just think my faith was my own before it was their own.
Well, it does give hope to parents because I feel like you're kind of told like, I mean, you can do your best, but they're probably going to just rebel and walk away, or like don't Christianize them too much because then they're going to resent or whatever. It's like no, you can immerse your kid in faith.
I think you can drown them in it if you want to some degree. And like my mom was great about kind of limiting my access to the outside world. Like I wasn't completely sheltered in some of those ways. She just was. She was like, I want to control what you see and what you do. I don't want other adults when you're away from me controlling that. Yeah. And so like I did community theater. There's nothing you don't see in community theater, let me tell you. Like I played community sports. Like I did club volleyball. She took me out of it in controlled scenarios. Yeah. Which I think helped me when I got to college because I wasn't shocked at the stuff that was happening around me. I just had learned how to live in it without participating in it. But I will say, like, even the kids, for the most part, that walked away in college or whatever, like, just about everybody in my graduating class from my high school, which was small, so I can keep up with pretty much all of them, they're all walking with the Lord at this point. Like, there's maybe 3 I can think of that they had issues with it at the time, right? Like, it's not surprising to me that that's what has happened in the long run. Whereas the vast majority of them are obsessed with Jesus still. And so I do think it works. Like I think there's something to be said to the formula. Like
that's cool.
It works. So
well, I'm glad to hear that. As a parent trying to raise my boys to know Jesus every day of their lives.
And it sounds like also you had space to ask questions and challenge and push back.
And I had a mom that put a lot of effort in to learn herself so that she could answer those questions and really talk about it, which is huge. I think a lot of parents just, especially if you put your kid in a Christian school or even in church, like I did youth ministry for years, and we would have parents that would just hand us their kids and be like, you're their spiritual teacher. Like, I don't want to participate in this. And I think the make or break it thing is what your parents do at home. Not even necessarily the environment you put them in, but also it's a both and.
Yeah. So talking about spiritual maturity, becoming grown-ups, in that adolescent phase where you start to learn things and ask questions and all that, you are very humble, but you know a lot. You've learned a lot. You teach apologetics classes. Like, you know a lot of stuff. How did that mature you, challenge you into someone I see as a spiritual adult who, because while you're very smart and you can talk apologetics all day, you still have the soft heart of Jesus, of loving people. And I feel like those two things don't always go together. People get too smart for loving people somehow. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
So talk about the challenges and humility and the growth and things you learned and how that built you or is forming you, obviously.
I'm not there yet.
No one's arrived. Question for you, Jenna.
I know. Let's talk. Let's get into it.
She can handle it. She's not Wade Lombard.
This guy.
Lobbing softballs to Wade. I'm just kidding.
Put her on
That was a
the tee
great
for Wade.
episode.
Exactly. Oh gosh. If I'm honest, I was probably more in the adolescent, too smart to love people category for much of my childhood. I think I grew up in a world that was very much that, very much too smart to love people. Like our church, remarkable place. I'm so grateful. I'm never would knock it. It was the most incredible place to grow up. But it also was a really big, famous church with a very famous pastor. Our services were on TV every week, like on Fox, like the local Fox affiliate kind of TV every week.
Wow.
Like it was, and it created this environment that was very behavior oriented. Like what does it look like on the outside, which is really the crux of legalism, right? Like that's the core of it, is what do you see on the outside? It's not paying attention to the inside. Whereas if you flip it, licentiousness, abuse of grace, whatever it is that you call it, is only looking sort of at the inside and not paying attention to the outside, right?
Yeah,
and I think
interesting.
Jesus does both. Even though it says obviously he pays more attention to the inside. I don't want to minimize that. But I think it was getting into my 20s and screwing up in ways that I never had before. Like I was the good kid that like did the things and whatever. I did plenty of stupid stuff growing up, but it wasn't like blind disobedience, until I got in my early 20s and there was a season of me just being dumb, like just doing dumb stuff. And then
Cannot relate to that.
no,
Did
ever?
you do that?
Never experienced that? It's coming.
I'll be praying for you though.
It's coming. Don't you worry. Thank you. I need it. I really
Yeah.
appreciate that. But yeah, I think that really knocked me out of my hyper legalism and able to say like, hey, I know the truth. Like now it's a cautionary tale, right? Like now I'm coming at it from like, oh, I don't want you to do these things because I know it's going to hurt you, not because like you're a bad person, but because I know it's not that God gave you a rule to like make your life not fun. It really will hurt you. He's really trying to protect you and keep you from like sticking your finger in the light socket, right? Like that's what's happening here. And I think that softened me significantly in a way that I wish that season hadn't happened, as everybody does, right? But I'm super grateful for it in the long run, and that the Lord didn't leave me there and used it to soften and shape and change me in a way that I think I'm much better off for in the long run. But yeah.
Having grown up and learning a lot about the Bible and being immersed, being taught by seminary people with all that knowledge, I think people would hear like, oh, I just grew up in the church and I always knew Jesus, and it'd be easy to go, oh, well, that's blind faith because you just, that's all you've known. But if you actually were put to the test, but you have been put to the test, you've asked all the questions, answered all the questions. So I want to talk a little bit about apologetics. What were the things or have been the things that have built your faith the most? To not be this blind faith, like this is what my mom told me.
Totally.
I went to a church and so I've just believed this, but to actually like stand firm in your faith and have a defense for it.
I think to start, part of the reason why I love apologetics and why I love theology and learning and knowledge and all of those things was because I don't have that BCAD moment. And so that really has been my foundation. Like the knowledge and the logic of it and how it is so immensely logical to believe in God. It makes all the sense in the world. You're told by the world that it doesn't. You're told by the world that it's a deeply illogical thing. Like, of course, that there's this thing that floats out there in the world and it's puppeting your life. And it's like, no, that's not. Once you learn the real God, once you learn the God of, Isaac and Jacob and Abraham, like, you learn how logical he truly is. And I'm a very logical thinker. It's why I'm a lawyer. It's why I do what I do. Like, I'm a very concrete thinker. And so I love apologetics because I think it is the foundation on which we build our house of our feelings about God, right? Like when Jesus says to build your house on the rock, like what does that mean? Like what is the rock? Like what are you actually doing? And I think it's knowing what you know and trusting it when you don't feel it. Like that's the entire crux of it.
Wow.
And then you build your house of your feelings and your joy and all the things that come with it on top of that foundation. And that's the beauty, and that's what everybody sees is that side of you. But what's rooting you at the bottom is what you know at your core to be true about God.
Wow.
And I think that comes from learning and repetition and being open to asking questions and grappling, because I think if you can't ask questions, you're going to have a rocky foundation.
Yeah.
So all that to say, that's why I love apologetics and theology and all of these things so much. But I'd say for me, because I'm a super logical, concrete thinker, I'm really not a philosopher. That's not my jam. I can do it. I like it, but it's not how I think. It really came down to, I look at this world around me and say, it seems deeply illogical to believe that all of this just popped into existence and continues to run perfectly at the level of minutia, these tiny little, as they say, the fine-tuning argument of the universe, like this, the details that are necessary in order for the world to function at the way that it does, and this idea that that just happened, right? Like, that's actually deeply illogical. Like, it's infinitely more logical and infinitely more reasonable to believe that what you're looking at was created by somebody. And that to me is the door into all of it. And then on the back end of it, there's so much evidence and so much logic for the resurrection of Jesus.
Yeah.
And you add those two things together and it's like, it's the God of the Bible. Like, there is no other answer. It has to be the answer.
Okay, so I got to sit in on your lecture on the resurrection. Phenomenal.
Thank you. I appreciate
And
that.
it's so important because so much of our faith comes down to an event, right? And so you were making the case that if we can prove the resurrection, then everything else, that can be our foundation. You gave the 60-minute version, and I encourage everybody to sit in or watch it.
Thanks.
Could you give us the 2-minute version?
Gosh, I can try.
Let's
I can
call
try.
it 3-minute version.
Yeah, I
It's
can try.
proof of the resurrection.
Low
Yeah,
stakes. It's
low
what
stakes.
everything depends on.
This is all of
Literally.
it. This is, no, I can, I think. Okay, so if we start, I'll start in reverse from how I structured the class then, because to me, the strongest evidence for the resurrection is the idea that there was this group of ragtag guys who we know for the most part were real. Like, there's a lot of tradition and history that show us they were real people. You can, research the canon and research, like, not even the canon, it doesn't even matter. Like, just the archaeological manuscripts and all the things that we know that these were real people and the things were written generally when we think they were written. There's a ton of very tangible scientific evidence to show that. So if these were real people, in order to believe that the resurrection didn't happen, you have to believe that they all concocted this story and stuck with it through the most gruesome of deaths, right? And none of them broke. None of them at any point were like, I was kidding.
Yeah.
Like, please don't crucify me upside down. Like, please don't do these things. Like, none of them said that. They all were willing to walk straight into brutal, stabbings and beheadings and stonings and burnings and crucifixions and these, like, the worst deaths you can think of, the most pain you can think of. They were willing to endure it because they knew it was true, right? If they had made it up, somebody would have cracked at some point. Like, that's just logic. Right? Yeah. Like, that's the problem with conspiracies. Eventually somebody cracks.
Yeah.
Like, if
We
there's
made it
enough,
up.
eventually somebody's like, I was kidding. Please don't do this. So there's that. And most scholars, even non-believer scholars that study the Bible, study as a historical document, do truly believe that they actually believed what they said they believed. Like, there's really nobody who has done enough study, even outside of the church, that believes that they were lying. They think they really believed whatever it was. And then you say, like, okay, well, then where did that come from? Did they all have some, like, mass hallucination? Like, that doesn't make any sense. We all know now, biologically, if, 10 people consume the same psychedelic, they're going to have 10 different experiences.
Right.
Because it all works with your brain chemistry. It all is a part of, it all plays differently with each individual person. And so the idea that all 12 of them had the exact same 11, and then Matthias had the exact same experiences, saw the exact same things, and then, several hundred people on the back end of that also having the exact same experience, We know that that is not how hallucination works. Maybe at the time people might have believed that, but now we've got enough science to be able to say, like, no, that's not how it works. That's we can see that. And so those things I love, because I just think it leads into how logical and truly safe I think you are in believing that these people didn't just die for no reason. Right?
Good.
And the fact that we know Jesus died, we know, like, there are historical documents that tell us that Jesus was a person and he was crucified by the Roman government. Like, there's a lot of historical data to say all of these events happened the way that the Bible say they happened. It's not crazy to believe what we believe. It might feel crazy to believe that, like, a guy rose himself from the dead and walked out of a tomb. Like, if you ever really think about what we believe, you're just like, oh my gosh, like, this is wild.
Yeah.
But it's actually not crazy to believe it, because there is a ton of concrete evidence to back it up.
And the question of
Phenomenal.
like, what's
I tried.
That was great.
That was great. What's the gain for all those people of
Right.
making that claim, right? Like, what are they?
Right.
And, you know, obviously eternity is what is urging them on, but in the worldly sense of a conspiracy,
didn't get famous.
They made that up. And that many people followed them. They were not people of influence by any means.
Nope.
Like, following those guys
Yep.
made no sense to
None.
listen to them.
None.
Which to me always speaks to just the power of the Holy Spirit, that people saw
Absolutely.
these dudes who had no reason.
Because they met Jesus. They weren't meeting Peter.
Right.
Yeah.
They were meeting
Right.
Jesus.
Yeah.
And that's the reality of when we evangelize generally, right? Like, it's not on us to convince anybody of anything. It's the Spirit through us. We're a vessel. We're nothing
Yeah.
more than that. Just like
Wow.
the disciples were a vessel. And when people have an encounter with the living God through us, that's when lives change. And I think that's what was happening in the early church.
Okay, well, that's my last question,
great.
but I am willing to start asking it now. And
Yeah.
then we'll do some other ones.
Yeah.
Sure.
Give advice to that
Yeah.
concept of sharing your faith with someone else, as
Yeah.
someone who could go to court
Yeah.
and argue your way and debate, you know,
Yeah.
like, you could do that.
Yeah.
Tends to not be the most effective
No.
way to reach somebody for the
No.
gospel.
I would imagine for like 5% of the population, it's effective,
Oh,
and then for like
totally.
95%, that
The
doesn't
ones
work.
that want to come back swinging at you, it might be mildly effective.
Yeah,
But
there are some people that love to debate about
Totally.
this stuff, and that's awesome. But
Yeah.
for the most part, I think the questions that we get a lot is like, how do I talk to my friend who doesn't believe in Jesus about Jesus?
Yeah.
My friend has all these questions. They're a skeptic.
Right.
They're an atheist, whatever.
or they believe in
Or different-
witchcraft,
yeah.
or they think the spiritual realm is real, but they don't know what it looks like. Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely.
What are the go-to things that you, like, in relationship, and
Yeah.
how you share the gospel and how you share Jesus with all that foundation that you have?
The number, because I get that question a lot too, and
That's because I always tell everyone, go ask Jenna.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, just ask Jenna. She'll tell you.
Jenna will
It's
tell you.
great. Thanks. Have a great
no,
Sunday.
hello, goodbye. Glad to make your jobs easier, gentlemen.
Appreciate that.
You really do.
Yeah.
I'm trying. Number one thing is to remember it's not your job to convince them; it's your job to love them. That's it. That's the whole ball game.
Drop the mic.
I don't want to break it, but
Please
it
don't.
looks expensive.
It is.
It
We
looks
don't wanna buy
nice.
another.
But yeah, I think going into it with the idea that you should have a hope for what you believe. That's why we teach these things, right? That's why we have classes like this at our church. And I encourage people to go to all of the classes. Deb and Jeff Newport are going to teach a class in September on the Sermon on the Mount, and that's going to be just a master class in theology. It's going to be incredible, and everybody should go to it, because the more you learn, the more it gets ingrained in you, and then the more natural the answers are going to be, right? So first step is take time, learn, study what you believe, like have answers for yourself, and then you will naturally have answers for other people as they ask them. But at the end of the day, it's between them and Jesus of what they think about him, right? Like, he's got it. He loves them infinitely more than you ever could. So just be that safe environment for them to be able to ask questions without judgment,
Yeah.
and give them the answers that you have, and admit when you don't, and say, I will come back with an answer to you later. And that's okay. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I think it takes a lot of confidence to be able to say, I don't know that right now. Let me go check. I'll come back to you. And then now you've got a new opportunity for another conversation with this person. Like, there's a lot of joy and benefit in that.
Yeah.
So I wish I had like a formula to follow. And I do, like, there are some great evangelistic formulas that people have developed over the years. My church developed this whole big thing called Evangelism Explosion. I don't know if you guys remember that. My church started that. Shout out. Wow. But there's some really cool things that you can study how to evangelize and what answers to questions and all of those kinds of things. But at the end of the day, I think any great evangelist would tell you that you yourself are the reflection of Jesus to those people, and how you handle their confusion will speak infinitely more to the character of Jesus than whatever answer you give them. So learn, take time, study, because those questions are going to come to you.
Yeah.
Spend time in prayer with the Lord, because the tighter you are with Jesus, I think the more the Spirit's going to have space to give you answers to those questions when people ask them.
Yeah.
And then just love people and be okay that they don't agree with you. Like, you have to be okay with that at the end of the day, and pray for them, because if you're not okay with it and you can't sit in the space of their tension, you could push them in a direction you don't want to push them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Or just give up on them.
Right, entirely. And just be like, oh, they're a lost cause.
Yeah.
Like, no one is a lost cause. There's not been a single lost cause that has ever walked the face of the earth. I think the Apostle Paul is the best example of that.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like, there is no lost causes.
Yeah.
And so pray, love, learn. Like, that's it. And you'll be ready to go.
Pray, love, learn. That's good.
I'm going to put that on a sign.
Pray,
That's
love,
what should
learn.
be here instead of the
We'll
Afterthoughts.
change the name of the
Learn.
podcast.
Please do. Pray, love, learn.
So in all the study and like different faiths and all these things, I can't find better news than the gospel.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that exists. I don't think anyone can match that with some sort of conspiracy or other faith or whatever. That God loves you so much that He came here and died for you so you could have eternity with Him. Why do you think some people are so set on disproving that?
Oof.
Like, what is it in humans that want to do away with the greatest news of all time?
I've got really good news. Oh, we're gonna pull the rug out from
Right?
underneath.
Yeah, like,
We've got
I
to
hate
disprove this.
yeah,
Good news is bad.
What is right? Like, what is
Yeah.
that in people that causes
Yeah.
so many? Like, why do those debates happen? Why do people want to disprove God and disprove Jesus when that is the best chance they've got and the best news
Yeah.
they could hear?
Yeah.
I think it's two-part. It's a great question.
Dude, thank you.
Look at you asking the good
Well,
questions. So that journalism
I've gotta do
degree,
something right.
kicking it.
Right.
Yeah.
I did go to college,
Yeah.
Kayla. Don't laugh at me.
After you took,
I know it's
After
shocking.
you went to
after you took
surfing,
surfing,
you eventually
learned how to
learned
ask
a
these
real
questions.
That's a big part of my testimony. It's not. I just loved it.
I would say sin and pride are the only two reasons I can think of. Because if the gospel is true, as good as it may sound, you have to admit that you need it to begin with, which people don't want to. And then if you've admitted that, if it is real, you have to change your life accordingly. It requires a response.
Yeah.
And people don't want to make that response. And I can't think of another reason other than if Jesus really did die on the cross for me, if I really am a sinner in need of a savior, if I really am on a path to destruction, and yet the God of the universe came and lived a life and experienced everything I've ever experienced so that He could honestly say, like, I know what it is to be human, and I empathize with you and your humanness, and then I'm going to sacrifice myself so that you can spend eternity with me. Like, you're right, there is no other religion that says that. There is no other faith system that has a God that sacrifices themselves like that. If all of that is true, Kevin, my co-teacher of apologetics, always says, right belief equals right action. And so if that's really true, it requires an action.
Yeah.
And it takes humility to admit that you have to take that action.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's easier to critique
Yeah.
at times. It's good. It's really good news, but it's also offensive at some level.
Yeah.
And when you're not ready for that, sometimes the easiest way forward is to find a bunch of questions and critiques to try to.
Which
to
I
try
think
to
is a good
combat
thing
it.
to remember about people when you're talking to them is they might not be ready.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really hard truth to come to an understanding of. And so being patient with people.
Yeah.
Just because they're seeking doesn't mean they're ready to find.
Oof.
So be patient and let them seek, and they'll get there.
Yeah.
You
I had
know?
those people in my life when I was not ready.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But just continue to love me and have conversations.
And that like
very grateful
point
for
of
that.
being ready is so mysterious
Right.
and beyond
Yeah.
our control.
Yeah.
Right. Like, what does that look like? And it's a switch usually. Like, it's usually like I've been fighting it. And then one day, one sermon, one thing makes me
Yeah.
cry. Like, I've heard the same thing 1,000 times and yet it sounds different this one time. And it's flip.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you just got to pray for that moment for them
Yeah.
and walk with them in the meantime.
Yeah.
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 The only
Love
other
that.
reason I can think of why some people are so set on disproving the whole thing is just the people that taught it to them.
Also that. Yeah. Also that.
That they don't want those church people to be right, or they have
Yeah.
pain or whatever. So it's like, you know what?
Yeah.
Actually, instead of just not believing what you say,
Right.
Yeah.
I'm going to make you look stupid, and I'm
Right.
going to prove to you. But the sad thing is, at the end of that mentality is like, what do you get from that? Because if you
Yeah.
disassemble this whole grace of God thing, then you have no
Then
hope.
what is it?
You have no hope.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, they're trying to find hope in other things. I think that's
Sure.
the reality is that everybody, I think if they could come to the point where they saw there was no hope outside of Jesus, they'd choose Jesus.
Yeah.
It's just not getting to that point yet.
Yeah.
Right? And wanting to believe that there's hope and that there's hope in self, right? Like we are able to accomplish hope. We are able to accomplish success and all of these things. And it's just not, that's just not reality, right? It's reality on this side of heaven. But not for eternity.
Yeah. It works until
Yeah.
it doesn't.
Right.
And then at some point it leaves you high and dry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in Colossians 1, Paul I love it's been in songs and stuff, but Christ in you, the hope of glory. It's like if people can see that in you, which is what you're saying, you can like know your stuff and answer those questions. But ultimately, if they see Christ in you, the hope of glory, they'll be interested to have a conversation.
And I think you cannot know a lot of stuff, and if they still see Christ in you, then they're going to be open.
That's
They're going to see it.
so important.
Right?
And so freeing.
Yeah.
Like to the person who's like, yeah, but I don't know all the answers
Yeah.
to all these things.
It's like,
okay.
cool, Jesus does, and he's in you.
Yeah.
Like,
Perfect.
awesome, done,
Yeah.
right?
And to your earlier point,
Yeah.
I don't know is a perfectly valid question, but let's investigate and figure it out together.
Yeah.
And because it's great to have answers to a lot of those questions because there are answers.
Yep.
Right. And that's what I love about what you and Kevin do in teaching people, equipping
Yeah.
people to say, if your friend asks you a question and you can't answer it, that's going to help in the conversation. But at the end of the day, it's not we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and our knowledge and the power of
Right.
our testimony.
Right.
I think that's where it's,
Yeah.
hey, I don't know the answer to that question. Can I tell you about what Christ has done in my life?
Exactly.
Like there's some things that I can speak to, and it's my
Exactly.
experienced relationship with him. And that's not even, it's hard to argue with, not that that's the point, but like when you have lived experience with Jesus and people see that in you and you say, I know what it's like to be alienated from God.
Yeah.
I know what it's like to in that old life. I can just tell you about what he's done since I surrendered to him.
Exactly.
That's what speaks the most powerfully, in my opinion.
The first class we told everybody, apologetics is not a replacement for your faith, and it is not a replacement for your story.
Ooh.
It's neither, because both of those things, like as logical as I am and as logical as I believe that the word of God is and believing in God is, there is still obviously a massive amount of faith that is involved, and you're never going to be able to wrap your human brain around all of it.
Right.
And so it requires faith, and you at some point in your life have to just be able to say, like, he's God, I'm not, and I have to just trust it. And my emotions don't, even if it doesn't line up, that doesn't change the fact that it's true. Like you have to get to that point. But I think what helps you get to that point is your personal story with God. And just like you said, people can try to argue with your personal story, but at the end of the day, it's your lived experience, right? They weren't there.
That's
they didn't
really
feel
good.
it.
Yeah.
And so couple that with all of the logic, and it's just like a 1-2 punch that is really hard to refute.
Yes.
We had a moment in the baptismal pool this last May where we were looking at each other. Doug was preaching, and it was like you could feel the Spirit just starting to move, and it was just working. And we were laughing like, it just works. We overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony.
Preach the gospel and let people tell what the gospel has meant.
Like logical answers to all these questions,
Totally.
super helpful.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, those are the two things.
Yep.
And so I love that.
But while we have you, prove that God is real.
Yeah.
Okay, so
What are the main topics for apologetics? Like, what are the heavy hitters that you guys dive into?
so we focus on the primary issues, because there's primary issues in theology and the world. There's secondary issues of theology. There's tertiary issues, right? And the primary being the ones of, if we disagree on these issues, we're really starting to talk about different religions. right? Like we're now no longer on the same page of like if you don't believe God is real, right? If you don't believe the word of God is the word of God, if you don't believe that Jesus actually died on the cross for your sins and rose and defeated death, you don't believe, you know, in the hope of the future of eternity through Christ. Like if you don't believe these pretty hallmark things, we're not on the same page here, right?
Yeah.
There aren't a ton of things that fit in that category.
Yeah.
It's a pretty slim list of the essentials, but it's a profound list of the essentials. And those essentials inform everything that you think about primary and tertiary or secondary tertiary issues, right? And so we focus, because Kevin and I are not the pastors of the church, and I do firmly believe that the Lord has called you two and Doug to speak into some of these secondary issues in a way for folks that he's given y'all the authority over our church, for better or for worse. But fact, you know, it's true.
Yes, we feel that.
But it's he has given y'all that authority, and we didn't want to overstep that authority. But at the exact same time, I think so many of the disagreements that happen in secondary and tertiary issues are rooted in a lack of understanding of the primary.
100%.
And so we really genuinely have to be stable in those primary issues. So God is real.
Yep.
He created everything around you. The Bible is true and reliable. It is the holy, inerrant word of God, right? Jesus was real. Jesus was God. And Jesus sacrificed himself for you in the resurrection, and then raised from the dead in the resurrection to conquer death so that you can spend eternity with him. Like, that's it. Like, that's the message. And that was what we talked about in the class, was how do you trust those things? Like going through like the Apostles' Creed, which I made them all read at the beginning of class, where it's like the standard things that we believe as Christians and have believed since the beginning of time, long before any of the secondary debates ever happened.
Explain the Apostles' Creed real quick.
So the Apostles' Creed is creeds. We'll start there. What is a creed?
Not just a 90s Christian band. You probably couldn't listen to at your church
Or a
because
great-
Scott Stapp wore wife beaters.
Or
drums.
a great character from The Office.
Also that.
Maybe the best.
Possibly the best.
You were in the parking lot earlier. That's how I know you.
The best.
If I can't
Oh,
scuba,
gosh.
what's this all been about?
Correct. Not that guy.
Been in plenty of cults.
Correct.
Some as a leader, some as a follower. More money as a leader. What does he say? More fun as a follower.
More fun as follow.
Would you guys like a minute to be able to?
No,
Sorry.
no. Apostles' Creed.
Let's get back to the Apostles' Creed, not Creed Breton from The Office. Two very different concepts.
Different concepts. Maybe the same. There's some connection, I'm sure. Maybe.
We can get there.
We can get there. So actual creeds, what they are these statements of faith that were repeated within the church from the early church. So they were a very oral tradition. A lot of people are like, well, how did, the earliest book of the Bible was written probably 10 years after Jesus died. So why were they not writing things down before? Like,
New
doesn't
Testament.
that, the New Testament, the earliest, you're correct.
Somebody
the
would
earliest one
comment,
of the New
actually,
Testament. It's not. The earliest one was.
actually.
Yes.
And Doug Wekenman.
It will be Doug, correct.
Okay, Doug, thanks.
Go back home, buddy.
Jenna, the Old
pay
Testament.
attention to your child. Don't pay attention to this. Buddy. Anyway.
Doug is always trying to troll Jenna. That's kind of one of his favorite things.
He keeps me on my toes.
Yeah,
and
it's
all
good.
right.
It's a fun thing.
Yeah, it's great. So yes, there was a very oral tradition, and so they would repeat these creeds to themselves. Oftentimes, sort of what you saw in Colossians 1 of that poetry about who Jesus was, that would have been a statement about Jesus that would have been repeated orally amongst people.
Yeah.
Just so hard for us to wrap our minds around because we can't even memorize phone numbers
I know.
anymore with the way that phones have just messed up everything.
Everything has ruined everything.
But they're
not this time.
no, that was fine.
Call Rogan.
Oh,
So
that was a commitment.
Don't need it.
memory was
The
way
Apostles'
better.
Creed,
Yes.
They didn't have phones when they wrote that.
Oral
tradition.
was super important, and so the Apostles' Creed was one. There was a Nicene Creed. There's a few others that were written in the early church as statements of what we believe, and then repeated since the early church. Churches today still repeat it.
Yeah.
I think those things are healthy and important because the more you repeat something, the more it sinks in, and so we have to remember that was a very common aspect of the early church. And so what the Apostles' Creed is it's just a statement of the essence of what Christianity believes, without any of really the secondary stuff thrown in, which is why we picked it, because it's just very contained.
Yeah.
So those are the big picture things that we covered in apologetics, so that then they can take theology classes and read books and have debates on secondary and tertiary issues and be rooted all in the same space of the Bible is true, Jesus is true, God is true. So now let's discuss, what does the Bible actually say about these secondary issues?
I think that's such a good point. Of so many of those arguments in the secondary and tertiary root back to an issue in the primary.
Right, totally.
Because so many people get caught in this smaller debate that someone else is saying, well, this disproves that God is loving, or this disproves the Bible, or whatever. It's like, first of all, if we're going to talk about that, let's trace back and start with God. Let's talk about Christ and meet people there first, because that challenges people in a way that I think that's important. That first, before we talk about whatever cultural or social thing, whatever you want to talk about, tell me your view of Jesus.
Right.
Yeah.
Because if your view of Jesus isn't who he really is, then we're never going to find ourselves on the same page anyway.
Yeah.
So that's helpful for people in equipping conversations with friends.
Especially the Word of God. That's a big one.
Yeah.
Because all of your secondary debates will root back to the supremacy you see the Word of God in.
Yeah.
And so if you don't trust the Bible and you don't trust that the books that are in it are right and that the words that are in it are right and that it wasn't just some book written 2,000 years ago that doesn't apply to me, then your conversations about those other issues are going to be vastly different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do you trust the Bible?
Yeah.
So there's the evidence side of it, my concrete thinking side of it, which is there's so many manuscript evidences that show us that it was actually written when it was written. There's a ton of archaeological evidence that tell us that the Old Testament events that are said to have happened actually happened. It has been a tradition for centuries that people have carried these through. But I would say more than anything, I have seen the Bible change people's lives. I told this story in class, and it's really the crux of everything for me, which is funny because I was in my 20s. It was in that funky season that I had with the Lord where he met me there. And I was in South Africa on a missions trip. And we went into this tuberculosis hospital, and we were like, bopping around, playing our music, doing our thing as mission trip kids do, and annoying the heck out
Real
of all
quick,
the people trying to
Doing
heal.
a Lifehouse drama.
I was at
Oh my gosh.
I was at the airport at like really late last night, San Francisco airport, and there was a crew of about 30. They came through with their matching shirts.
Yeah.
And
So
I have
good.
nothing. It was so pivotal for both of us.
Yeah.
So I have nothing but just like fondness for them.
yeah.
But I was watching them like laughing and heading to their gate.
Yeah.
And like,
It's just joy. It's so
awesome.
important. It's so important.
so South Africa.
So South Africa, we were doing that.
Yep.
Didn't have matching shirts, but close. And we're
Sometimes
all
better to not.
Sometimes
'cause
not.
Some places people are like, oh, I know who you
Those
are.
people,
We're going to kidnap you. Okay.
all the white people with their matching shirts.
Yeah, they're neon green.
Exactly.
It's always
yeah.
bright.
Always bright.
I have our buddy was a youth pastor, and he was leading a mission trip of high school kids, and he wanted to give some kids some important roles.
Yeah.
Going to Guatemala, he tells this one kid, he's like, you are a gatherer of people. Create a Facebook, this is back when Facebook was, create a Facebook group so the parents and kids can all get in it and talk about the trip and preparing.
Yeah.
And the kid named it The Saviors of Guatemala. And we're like, put that on a t-shirt and show up to the airport.
Couldn't have come up with a worse name.
Oh, you missed the whole point. Okay.
Okay.
Pretty-
all right,
pretty
buddy.
awesome.
Cool. Love it.
But a good heart.
But a good heart.
Of course.
And he learned a lot, I'm sure.
Just
on
like
his
you had
trip
a
to
good heart in
Guatemala.
South Africa, and we keep interrupting
yeah,
you.
there it is, back there. And so we walked in, and everybody in the recovery room they were very happy to see us, and everybody was singing and dancing, and it was like trying to bring joy and life to a sad season in their life. And then I saw a guy on the other side of the room who he grabbed his pillow like a child and flipped it over his head because he was so angry that we were in there singing about Jesus. And so I'm like, obviously I'm going to go talk to you.
Yeah.
You definitely want me to.
Yeah.
And so
This will go well.
Right. And so I went over with a couple of my friends, and he proceeded to tell us basically how much he hated God. How angry he was, how he blamed God for every ounce of struggle he had in his life, for ending up in this hospital, for all of just everything that had gone wrong. And to your point about church hurt, a lot of it was that. A lot of it was Christians who hadn't lived the way Jesus, who didn't have a good understanding of Jesus, and therefore did not live the way that Jesus lived with him. And so I've never seen somebody be so vitriolic towards the Lord. it wasn't even that he didn't believe he was real. It was that he knew he was real and he hated him.
Wow. Dang.
It was, and I was so angry at God at that season of my life that I don't know if you've noticed, I do have things to say a lot of the time. I didn't in that moment. A couple of my friends handled it, and I just stood there because I was like, I get it. Like, I kind of get why you're so mad. And we walked away, and we went to another wing of the hospital, and as we were leaving, a friend of mine told me that she had given her Bible to one of the patients at the hospital. And I felt, one of the first times I heard the voice of the Lord again during that season was him, like, as close to the audible voice. It wasn't audible, but as close to the audible voice of God saying, give your Bible to this man. His name was Daniel. And I fought God a little on it because I was like, I literally just bought this Bible and I don't want to give it up.
Was it leather?
It was the metal cases. You remember the OG metal cases?
Nice.
And I
Metal
really wanted
cases.
one of those, and I bought it, and I had to give it away.
We'll get you an Afterthoughts branded
I
one.
appreciate that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Sure.
And so I was so like kind of cranky and bitter about it. I didn't even give the Bible to Daniel. I gave it to a friend and asked them to go give it to him because I just didn't want to participate. And we left. 3 days go by, which is not lost on me, the irony of that. And we come back to bring a box of Bibles that was in the local language because some of the patients only spoke the local language. And so we bring these boxes of Bibles back, and I went to go check on Daniel because I couldn't stop thinking about it. Yeah. And I walked in, and I see him, and he's like over in his little corner bed. He's got my Bible out on the bed, and he was reading it as I walk in, and he sees me, and he breaks down crying. And he was like, this is your Bible, isn't it? And I'm like, bro, I didn't even give it to you. How did you know that? Like, you never saw me holding it. You never, like, and he was like, I know this is yours. And he proceeded to tell me that he had spent the last 3 days, from the moment we gave it to him to the moment when I came and saw him, doing nothing but reading.
Wow.
He hadn't eaten. He hadn't slept in 3 straight days. He had started in Genesis, and he was in Acts by the time I saw him.
Dang.
Whoa. So he just
He
powered
just powered
through the Old
through
Testament.
it, powered through it, and was a completely different person.
Wow.
Like, his eyes changed,
Yeah.
his joy changed.
Yeah.
He all of a sudden was talking about how he wanted to become a pastor, and like went from hating God 3 days ago to completely in love, obsessed with the Lord. And all that changed was that he read the Bible for 3 straight days. That was it. No one preached to him. No one gave a quippy, wonderful sermon about interpreting the
Thank you
Bible
for
to him.
Thank you for working wonderful in there.
Yeah, it was great. None of that. He just got the word of God for 3 days straight
That's it.
Wow.
and was a completely different person. And it healed a lot in me to watch that happen.
Yeah.
And so when you ask, like, why do you know the Bible is true? I've seen it. Yeah. Like, I've seen it change people's lives. I've seen other people's reading of the Bible change my life. I didn't even read it. Someone else did, and it still changed my life. I mean, I had read it, but like in that moment. So yeah, it's logical and it's also experiential.
That's a really cool story.
Yeah.
Very cool.
That's why we're trying to tell people, like, just read this letter.
Yeah.
Just read Paul's letter to the Colossians.
Colossians.
It will change your life.
Read
Read it every
July
day for
and
4 weeks
Colossians.
and watch what happens.
Yeah.
Kayla, Ethan, Haley.
Gosh, guys.
Just trying with these rebellious teenagers.
I know.
It's crazy. Like we read it again as a staff this morning. Every time I read it, it's a short letter.
Yeah.
And still every time I read it, something new sticks
Yeah,
out.
there was things in chapter 1 that I was reading this morning. I was like, oh, I should have
I
talked
just
about that.
preached this,
Like,
yeah.
you know, like I didn't
Yeah.
even, that spoke to me different. You know, it's
Yeah.
it's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, last question. For those that are logical thinkers
Yep.
like you, and you're a lawyer, how is that mentality and being a lawyer, like how does that most help you in your faith and sometimes most hinder you in your faith?
Ooh.
I think it hinders in the way that, again, these things are not a replacement for faith, and I want it to be sometimes. Like, I want to have all of the answers to it, and if the Lord is doing something that doesn't make sense to my logical mind, I battle with it, you know, and have to sit my own butt down and say, like, he is God, you are not. Just because you don't get it doesn't mean it's not logical to him. But I have to, like, work through that with him. I think it helps in the sense that I'm able to see the story from start to finish and how all the pieces kind of fit together, right? Like the pieces that I can see on the chessboard. God sees all of it, but the ones I can see, like, and because it's so logical, like even in the seasons where things have been really hard and I feel the enemy whisper in the back of my mind, like maybe all of this is a lie. Like maybe you have actually spent your entire life on something that isn't true. And I can pretty easily go, shut up. Like I don't, you know what I mean? Like, because I know this is logical and I know it makes sense and I know it's right and I know it's true. And I can point to a ton of things that back that up for me. And my foundation is 6 feet deep. So when my house shakes, it's okay in the long run because I've spent so much time digging through the logic of it. So yeah, I mean, my house is maybe not as pretty as some other people's houses. You know what I mean? Like maybe the experiential side of it and the emotional side of it, I don't have as much decor in my house than some other people, but
Foundation.
it's not going to shake. Like it's not going to go anywhere.
And that is spiritual maturity, right?
Yeah.
Is those circumstances and questions have ultimately, they've had their moments of shaking the house, but you haven't been moved.
Right.
You have gotten only firmer in your belief in Jesus and helped other people build their foundations, which is where you find purpose and fruit, ultimately in your life. So
you do it very well.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you
guys too.
Thank you for help other people to build that foundation.
Of course.
Shout out to your husband, Greg.
Yeah.
We should have mentioned him at the beginning.
Greg's the best.
He is the best.
We have saved the best for last. We love you, Greg.
We do.
You're a great guy.
We love you.
Congratulations again on the Stanley Cup.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Enjoy Shark Week.
Yeah.
Thankful you did not
will.
get eaten by a shark.
Yep.
Yeah. No, me too.
Yeah.
And tell Harvey and Mike and the guys at the firm hello from me.
Will do.
And,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you again, Jenna.
Of course. Thanks for having me, guys.